didn't see anything on there. I move we approve the consent agenda as well.
Been moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Motion passes. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Alright. First item under old business is substation location. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to speak to this agenda item?
What is the agenda?
Amber, can you pull up the agenda? You can just leave that up. I see no public comment for that agenda item. Council discussion? Substation location?
Where was the location? What location has been decided upon?
That's what we're deciding tonight. The primary that we spoke about is the old motel in that area. And I think that's kind of the general gist that the city employees would like, is just the general area of where we'd like to.
So we do that on the west end or east end or in the middle, or,
That will be part of their,
so the whole thing belongs to us, so it doesn't make any difference, right?
correct.
That's where we pull all our numbers
Do you
from.
need a motion on that?
We do need a motion on that.
I make a motion that be the old motel area.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next agenda item is the condemnation ordinance. Is there anybody here from the public like to speak to this agenda item?
There's someone down there on, they go to the nursing home.
Seeing none. This is the same condemnation we spoke about at the last meeting regarding the new roadway going across the creek. We have to pass an ordinance since we passed the resolution for it.
Are they here to speak on it? We kind of talked this one through last time. Kind of a bummer it has to go this way, but there's really no other option.
I see, there's stakes down there, and there's a, on the south side of the driveway where Outlet Right goes in and out of the building, there's a green marker stake, and I think that marker stake means that they won't go back any farther than that so he can get in and out. Does anybody know whether that's the case or not?
Rob, is that
Is
accurate?
that right, Ron?
Right, that's correct. We spoke with Alan early on in the project and assured him that he'd be able to get in and out of his garage at all times. But that access road is gonna have to go around on that side of the street. There's just no other way. So that's probably temporary easement that you're seeing flagged, Jerry. Permanent easement's more towards the creek bottom.
Yeah.
For grading
I know,
purposes.
I know how it works. It was the green marker, and I thought, well, that's where they're gonna end it, so he can still get in and out of the driveway.
Right.
Yeah. That's the case. I'll make a motion. Continue on with condemnation.
Jared moves for the condemnation ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Jerry?
Second. What?
Yes,
All in
sir.
favor, yes.
Corey?
Aye.
Scott?
Yes.
Julie?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda is the rate study. I'll explain this and then we'll see if anybody, I doubt anybody's here to talk on this, but, so we checked with KMEA, Glenn did, and they were willing to do the rate study for free. Correct, Glenn?
That's correct, yeah, they would do, on the electric rate study, we had proposed last time doing all three utilities, this is just the electric side. So as a member of KMEA, and we have been for a long time, they're proposing to do this as part of their services that they offer to members at no charge.
That's the committee you put me on?
Yes, that, well, it is a organization, right, you're on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did that.
Just from now on, any committee that isn't outside of the city council, Jerry.
Huh?
Is it any committee that's outside the city council? You're the designated person.
Gosh, I'm important.
You just have the most time. Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? None, council discussion?
What was the time, did you get a time frame of how long it take them to do it, when they start?
I did, yeah, I reached out to him today, and Darren was thinking it would probably be September before he could have it completed. He's also working on it, several different cities at the same time, so he said he can't put us before then.
Did you remind him how much we are paying for this?
Yeah, same the other cities are.
So what would it take to get us to the head of the line, I guess?
I did, however, include in the council packet some, numbers. They did a comparison between, some of the cities in Kansas and, Evergy's, and I included that in the package. Those numbers are about a year old, so that's kind of the start of what you guys were wanting.
Any other further council discussion on this agenda item? Not, I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the offer from Kansas Municipal Energy Association to perform an electric rate study for Morgan City.
I second.
Been moved and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay, motion passes. Next agenda item is the library board appointments. We have two of them this round, we have two board members fall off. We had two applicants that applied for those open positions. So I'll ask, I guess, each one of them, whoever, Stephanie, if you wanna start, just to come up and introduce yourself to the council.
Alright. I'm Stephanie Cully. I am currently a data engineer, work in Overland Park. Been living in Baldwin City since 2007, and I just love our wonderful community here and have always been impressed with the library. One of my first stops when I moved to town was the library, and been looking for ways to get back to the community, and this opportunity came up, and I am very happy to be able to volunteer.
You said you were an engineer?
I'm a data engineer, so IT, technology, data-based stuff.
Any questions from the council?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Marta?
Hello,
How are you?
hi, fine, thanks. I'm Marta Jordan. I am a retired nurse, actually. I was an ICU nurse and then I was a school nurse for years. And we have lived in Baldwin for, I don't know, maybe 8 years, but my husband's family's, eternally from Baldwin, the Jordans. I volunteer a lot all over town, Santa Fe Trail Historical Society, the Lions Club. I volunteer a lot in the Kansas Room here at the library, and libraries have always been near and dear to me. I think they're very important, and this opportunity came up, so here I am offering my services.
Any questions from the council?
I'm a natural talker, that's right.
All right, thank you, Marta.
You're welcome.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? If not, council discussion?
I think they'll be great. Both of them.
Nothing here. Sounds good.
Is that a motion?
I will entertain a motion.
I move to appoint Marta Jordan and Stephanie Cully to the library board.
I second.
Moved in second, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed nay. Motion passes. Thank you, ladies. Next item on the agenda is sprinkler system discussion. And we have two business owners that are here to discuss on this. One of you, whichever wants to step forward.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ken Wagner. I live on 501 Lawrence Street. One of the owners of Heritage Tractor. First of all, I haven't met everybody on this council, but I know quite a few of you. Thank you for your service to our community. We addition onto our main building out here on the east side of Baldwin. It's a 8,000 square foot facility that we want to add on to the, essentially the west side of the service department. Our business has grown to the point where on combines and some of the bigger equipment, we need more space. And so anyway, we've hired Davidson Architect and Engineering. They're a company out of Kansas City that does a lot of our engineering work on our different facilities. We have 21 facilities now, which I was talking to Bill Clements out in the hallway. It all started here in Baldwin, and Baldwin community has been just exceptionally gracious to us in our business. So it just makes sense that we have the opportunity to build and expand here. We want to do more of it here in Baldwin. So anyway, we also have signed a letter of intent to build a property with a company called Hasco Construction, that's out of Lawrence. And they built our facility up in Lawrence. They also built our biggest facility that we have down in Adrian, Missouri. So both of these companies are very reputable companies. So the problem that we have with the Baldwin project is the whole issue of water supply, both pressure and flow. And I guess we're in a little bit of a conflict with Glenn and his staff here about what the water system will actually do. We hired a engineering firm to do a water flow test and back in the fall, and they came back and said they thought it was questionable whether or not the flow and the pressure of the water system out at 915 Industrial Park was adequate to energize a sprinkler system. Just for reference, when we horsepower check a tractor, we hook a tractor up to a dyno. A dyno, we could put like an 800 horsepower tractor up to it. And when you put that kind of horsepower through one of those machines, it generates a lot of heat. So we have to put water to it to cool it down. When we do that, we can't flush toilets or drinking fountains. We can't use drinking fountains out there because we lose the majority of our pressure and the flow. So we've had to install some makeup pumps out there to kind of, when we're doing that, and we don't do it all the time, but when we do it, so we can kind of carry on business throughout the rest of the facility. So I think the building official has done some tests, and his numbers conflict with the numbers that our engineering company has done. So we've had our building permits and drawings in Baldwin since November. And we'd like to get this project going. Stu said that he's using the 2003 International Building Codes. And I just want to read a section out of that building code. It's section 104.1, which is listed as modification. I'm just going to read the code. It says, wherever there are practical difficulties involved in carrying out the provision of this code, the building official shall have the authority to grant modifications for individual cases upon application of the owner or owner's representative, providing the building official first find that special individual reasons make the strict letter of this code impractical, and the modification is in compliance with the intent and purpose of this code, and that such modification, excuse me, does not lessen health, accessibility, life and fire safety, or structural requirements. The details of action granting modifications shall be recorded and entered into the files of the Department of Building Safety. So that is, again, section 104.1 of the 2003 International Building Code. So I guess my presence here tonight is to ask for consideration of that modification that's included with that International Building Code, and for you to consider that. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions about our project.
What are you gonna do in that extra 8,000 square foot area?
That's a good question, Julie. There's no office space, there's no restrooms. It will all be used, there will be 2 bridge cranes added to it in there, to lift up heavy, like engines and transmissions and that kind of thing. But it'll primarily be used to work on combines and self-propelled sprayers. Things that will need a little more hook height on there, so that, the way it's presented to the city right now, the eave height on that building portion will be 4 foot taller than the existing building that's out there right now. So strictly repair.
How many square feet do you have now?
We have 30, I believe it's 30,000, Jerry. I think it's
You're
30.
gonna add this new addition onto that 30,000,
Mhm.
and I take it you have a sprinkler system in the 30,000.
We do not,
You do not.
we do not. When we built that build,
When I
I'm
first
sorry,
came on, when I first came on the council, I went with the water guys, and they took me around and showed me where lines were at, pump stations and such as that. I am a little bit familiar with water. I think I was advised that there was a 6-inch, an 8-inch, and a 12-inch main out there, and you're advising me that you don't have the flow?
that's what our engineer said. Now, I think there will be people in this room that can address this thing with more information than what I probably can remember, but I think the 12-inch is the line that runs from Baldwin to Wellsville, so it runs along the highway. And then there's another line that comes up to a fire hydrant, but it dead ends right there. And then there's another smaller line on High Street that dead ends back there, as I understand it. So part of the problem that our engineering firm has told us is there's not enough, it's not looped. So if his concern is if there was a fire in there and it activated that it would draw all the water out of those lines and the line would basically be pulled dry because it's not looped. It doesn't have the ability to put the water back into the line quick
I
enough.
understand loop lines. How do you have to go through the fire marshal? The state fire marshal to do any of this?
It's my understanding we do not. Because the building official has the ability to modify any of these codes into the 2003 building code, which is the code, as I understand it, is the code that Baldwin.
That's in the code book of 2003.
Yep.
It's also in the code book of 2006, which is international.
I don't have the 2006. I was told that Baldwin operated under.
We do, I believe we do.
So what's 2000s? What's the?
That's international. There's an international law and a state law.
Okay.
I think.
I'm not sure if building codes are law or not, but
But I think that the city, I don't know all this for sure, but I'm kind of guessing some of this, but I think the city probably has adopted the rules and regulations that you read. And I think in that adoption, it said that probably whatever the state law is, we have the same law. And I don't know whether we can change state law or not.
He's quoting a clause that says that we have the authority to have discretion.
It's the modification, is what he's looking for. So my question is, though, if you had water pressure, would you still be going for the modification, or is it simply the water pressure issue?
it's the water pressure and the water flow issue.
Okay, and did I hear you right that your engineer said it was insufficient, and then the city had one that said it was, so now there's a discrepancy around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. That's my understanding, Scott.
I'm thinking, Scott, that when I went out there and talked with the guys and looked through the lines and stuff, seems like they said there was 60 or 65 pounds of pressure in that line. How many pounds of pressure does your engineer say it takes to work on?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't have any further questions.
Any other questions?
Just get some clarification on our ability to actually seek a modification to, because I read what you had in the package.
Sure.
So I think it's important that you,
So
Glenn asked me to draft up something for the meeting tonight regarding state statute and then Kansas, the KARs, the regulations. So what I provided the council was not from the IBC 2006 code, which is what we've adopted, well, we adopted 2003 IBC, but I didn't put the code into that. I just put in the state statute and KARs that address modifications that are made by city councils or municipalities. Specifically, it's if you want, as a municipality, not on a case-by-case basis, but for your adoption of code, generally to make an amendment or modification of the actual code. So opposed to a single property, single situation, this would be a blanket modification. That process, the city council, any city council can put together a modification, vote upon it, pass that modification, and then send a summary of that modification to the state fire marshal. So that would be if we were going to modify the adopted code that we have in place right now, which is the IBC 2003 code. Just to use an example, if you want to make notices, give people additional time for notices or additional time for publication that's part of the code, you could say that the 30-day notice period opposed to 14-day notice period. You could make that modification, send it off to the state fire marshal, and they could approve or deny it within 30 days. What we just were talking about here, what the presentation that was here was section 104.10, 104.10 of the IBC in 2006 or 2003. They're both the same, but that's modifications that are allowed by the building official. I think in this case, that would be Stu would be the building official who could allow for modification based upon the language in that 104.10 subsection. So that is a separate issue than what the council is allowed to do. I also put in that packet, there's the ability for individual petitioners, so homeowners, business owners, churches, schools, whatever the organization would be, they can also make application to the state fire marshal for a variance or modification or exemption. And that requires a couple different grounds be met. That's in the packet, but the short of that is if it is an unnecessary burden upon them, or if they're wanting to adopt some new method or equipment that hasn't been considered previously under the building codes. And both of those doesn't impact the possibility of impacting negatively the life or safety of occupants of that building. So that's another decision. That's another decision that can be made by the state fire marshal, but that would be not the council making presenting. That'd be a written request by a petitioner, in private individual. As for the council, the only thing the council really has control over is requesting, passing ordinances, and then sending a summary of those ordinances to the fire marshal for their approval within 30 days. And that approval would be then in written form back to the council, or that denial would be in written form back to the council. I would note too that I think the language in that let me pull it up, I had it right in front of me, but I think it is the 22-11 KAR. The language in there does discuss specifically if a city's adopted either a nationally recognized fire code or fire prevention code or a business or a building code with a fire subsection in it. So that's when a city have adopted that. That's when the fire marshal then can come in to basically approve or disapprove any modifications to that code that's been adopted.
We have adopted that, therefore that's why we would have to go through
The adoption triggers that process.
Right. So, read back what I think I heard you say. So, individual petitioner can go straight to the fire marshal for a modification.
Correct.
But that's just for that single event, entity, building.
For whatever project it was that
Right.
we're going to, or
Right.
series of projects, yes.
Council could do the same thing, but then it would be a modification to this code, and then would apply to everybody from this point forward.
So
And I don't know how specific a modification is, right? It's like.
That's where I was gonna come from, was like, yeah.
And then the third part of that question I have is, does the building inspector have the modification authority without having to go to the fire marshal?
So, we'll start with the last one, which is
Okay.
the, under 104.10, the ability of a building official to allow for modification. The way in which I read the 2006 International Building Code, or 2003 International Building Code for the same, the purpose of the building official is to have the authority, they can have authority to grant modifications on an individual case-by-case basis. Got to make application to them for that. I think the key part of that is that if you break down the modifications, there has to be a special individual reason that makes strict application of the code impractical. And then it also has to be such that the modification does not lessen health, accessibility, life and fire safety or structural requirements. So that's all written down, it is put into the file, so if there's a modification granted, you can go back and review the grounds for that modification. The basic that you're looking at there are, is there some reason, some special individual reason here that makes it impractical, and does the modification not lessen the safety of that structure, building, whatnot? And that's a decision that the building official can make in their capacity.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Do you have that notification for the building that you already have?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Do you have this information like he's talking about for the building that you already have, that you don't have a sprinkler system in?
It was built before 2003,
Before what?
2003.
Baldwin didn't require it.
It wasn't, that was,
When did you start, 97? About that?
We built that building in 98.
98.
and that, these codes weren't in effect at that
So
time?
the state statute that we're discussing was adopted in 2000, references the 2000 code, and then later amendments reference the 2006 code. So this would have been built before that state fire, before that amendment, that statute, and then the KARs were adopted regarding the state fire marshal. The building code obviously was adopted after this as well, so both of those would have been post the building in, it was 97 or 98. Construction would occur before the code is in place here or before the statute and KAR.
Is that KR 21-136 or something like that?
The KAR that allows for modification of ordinances is 22-11, for individual exemptions is 22-14.
So they didn't have to have it when they built it.
I'm sorry?
They didn't have to have it when they
The
built it.
building previous.
Yeah, I got it.
Statutes.
Second
But
question,
now then, if he adds on to his building, the 8,000 foot, is that gonna pertain to the whole building that he already has, that he has to put sprinkler systems in it all?
So, and I want to be clear about the question is not that will it trigger on the 8,000 square foot portion of it, but would it trigger it on the entirety of the building because you're making an addition to the building, so now the entire building as a whole has to fall underneath this.
That's
And I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head.
that's my question.
And I don't know
If
the
he has,
answer to
if
that.
he has to do it for 8,000, and he hooks it onto the building, then he's gotta do it for the whole building, I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, I don't know the answer to that question. I can certainly research that and I can issue you that. My understanding, and I'll be fair, this is if it's a detached building, that'd be one thing. If it's an attachment, I think your question is an interesting one that I need to research. But I couldn't tell you today, when you make any modifications or additions to a building, that then triggers the code being applied retroactively to the entirety of that structure.
But
If I had to put an addition on my house and it was built in 1960, I don't have to rewire my entire house to 2003 codes.
we're not talking about what?
Even if it did, regardless of what we're talking about, the council has the authority to say to heck with the whole thing, we wanna word it differently.
so let's get back to that.
Sure, let's.
And present it to the fire marshal.
The rest of the public comment?
Well, I just want, the other question I have, though, I think is important, is what would the modification language look like in this case? I mean, how narrow a scope is it? Do we have that? Is there a recommendation? What would we propose to modify?
So, and Scott, I'm not the person probably to tell you what that language is, 'cause I think that's the council's job is to draft that language, and I then be able to guide you what you drafted.
So let me ask you a different way then. So obviously, there's recommendations of a modification to it. Is it just a modification to eliminate it? That's one modification.
Well, so if you go back and look at, well, a modification or of the code could certainly be just an elimination of certain subsections, right? What I would suggest, or make sure the council's considering, is that if it has to be approved by the state fire marshal, the state fire marshal is probably going to have a more, not, I wouldn't say stringent view, but they're certainly coming at this from, as a state fire marshal, making sure that they are following the charge of their position, which is to ensure the safety of the public and building structures from any sort of fire or related incident. So if you were to go in and line item out huge swaths of the code, I think that would probably raise the air of the state fire marshal. I also would caution that if there's not any modification that's some alternative, or giving some alternative safety measures in place, that probably would be less likely to be acceptable from the state fire marshal's position than a modification that was instead of a deletion, a modification, say, in these circumstances, we would propose these, if you can't, if this is not practical, these would be the practical solutions that we would impose.
Right, so that's my point. To have us sit up here and try to figure out what the right modification would be that might get approved by the fire marshal, I don't like our chances. You know, I think we need some more professional guidance on what's the modification we're looking for and how would that be presented.
Well, and I will say this, that the way that the statutes are written and the way that the KRs are written, the state fire marshal on individual requests, so not modifications of ordinance, but for individual applications, for exemptions or for modifications, has to write, they have to write an opinion basically each time those are requested, and those are kept at the state fire marshal's office, they are accessible to the public. So you have at least, I think, that would be, I would suggest, a good starting point for guidance about what the state fire marshal has and has not approved in the past for individuals but you could then take it and adopt that as for language and ordinances as well, if the council wanted to use those as starting points, because there are, I think these requests get made fairly frequently to the state fire marshal, and there's a good track history of what is approved or disapproved based upon those requests.
That makes sense. Last question for me, for now, is, so, I guess, as a council, I think we should be concerned about risk for the city. And so I guess that's the other thing we need to have some thought process around is, would this modification put the city at any greater risk of liability, whatever that might be? I'm not looking for an answer today, but I think we need to think about that as well.
So I share that concern regarding liability, risk insurance, not just for the city, but for people living inside of the city, depending on what was proposed. I think the other consideration to take into account would be if there's ordinance change or a code change to ordinance, how that would impact future development, both positively and negatively. I think there would probably, I work with enough developers and had enough issues of my own to know that code oftentimes can hinder growth. At the same time, code, on the other end of it, can protect investments, protect people from folks who aren't gonna, you don't wanna be next to somebody who's gonna burn your own business down, so I think that'd be something to consider too. But I don't have the answer for you today about how that impacts liability for the city.
Okay.
That's a good question that you asked, because I went through the same thing in my mind before I left the house. In answer to your statement, Casey, if you were adding on to your house and you had to have it inspected, and the inspector come along and said your wiring wasn't good enough that you have in your house and you needed to rewire, that would be the reason you'd have to do it. I think that's the same reason that we're dealing here with Mr. Wagner, is he already has a building that doesn't have it in there. So my question was, does he have to put it in all the way? I was wondering about this fire thing, fire code thing, if that would affect the insurance for the people living in town.
Yeah, I don't think that'd be a stretch, I don't know, I'm certainly it might impact the business insurance, but I'm not sure.
Could impact it either way, because
I'd like
those
to-
sprinklers go off, you got a heck of a claim.
Right.
Let's get back to public comment. and then we'll-
I'd like to hear some, from some more information, or professional information about all this.
Okay, well, let's get public comment finished up.
You ready?
Yep, I'm ready, I think.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Rice, Rice Precision Manufacturing. We're at 401 East High, right down the street from Ken. So my situation is a new twist. I'm looking at purchasing, haven't yet, but a property just to the north of me. There's 7.5 acres. 6 weeks ago, I contacted Hasco, same individuals that working with Ken on putting together a proposal for a building there. So I gave him some plans on what I wanted to see. We're targeting a 25,000 square foot state-of-the-art manufacturing and automation facility here in Baldwin. First thing he brought up when I gave that to him is, sprinkler systems, and there's a problem. There's not enough water, and there's no loop, same thing he was mentioning. I haven't seen any of the studies near that, but I'm just going off what he had told me, and they looked into it, and they've been working with Ken for quite a while now. That is one of my concerns. The other concern is an actual sprinkler system in my building, where I'll have probably $15 to $18 million worth of electrical equipment that I have a big concern with malfunctioning sprinkler systems. My insurance company loves the fact that I have fire protection in place. So talking about waivers or, in my case, I'd like that to be considered. So a couple questions. How long is this gonna take? That seems like a 20, 30 initiative or something.
Well, state fire marshals, I believe it states that if we make the request to them, they have 30 days to respond to us.
Okay. I don't know if you have any questions for me. That's basically, I'm in the same boat. Can anybody here comment on water lines out there? As far as what we have?
I'm sure there's somebody back there in the audience that has some. deal.
Rob probably could.
It wouldn't take a whole lot to make a loop line out there,
Rob,
if that's
That-
possible. But
yeah,
anyway.
he can come up and next, Brian.
One up here.
You'll hold your mic up.
So the data that Jerry quoted is correct. There's a 12, an 8, and a 6 out there. The 12 was in before I started working here. I put the 8 in and probably the 6. I did send a couple of water guys out there to test it. The hydrant out there, head pressure on that hydrant, I believe, was 65. Static was about 40, 45. And so that's the only numbers on those that I have seen. And I know that Mr. Wagner had some folks come out there and do some testing on it. I didn't see the data from that test, but I think Steve has it, maybe Glenn. That's what's out there right now, and that can fluctuate a little bit depending on the level of the towers and the pumps running. There's things that can affect that pressure. The day that we took that test, I don't recall the level of the towers or if the pumps were running, but I would say we just call that an average day. So I don't know what it takes to run sprinkler systems. Pressure-wise, volume-wise, GPM, I'm not sure. But that's what's out there, and if, I don't know if you have any other questions that I can answer.
I don't.
The 12 is ours. I don't know where the tipping point is between Baldwin and Wellsville, where we've changed his hands, but in front of Mr. Rice's business, that is ours. We've had leaks out in that area, we've had to run repairs, so I know it's our line, at least out that far.
Is that a possibility to be looped?
We would have to look, I don't know what we would loop it into. The 12?
Yeah.
The 12 to the 8?
To the 6 or whatever? Or the 6 and the 8 together?
I know.
I know pressure,
I know the 6.
the pressure is a constant.
He's right about that.
Pressure is always a constant. It's gonna be the same.
Right. And that's,
But volume is
that's
what,
the outskirts. I mean, that's pushing water to some of the farthest points in town. And that's the pressure we saw that day.
the volume is what they seem to be concerned about.
Right.
But the pressure is a constant that be there. As I
Assuming
understand
we
it.
don't lose pressure in the entire town.
Right.
This might be a dumb question, but if there is a fire out there, do we have enough water for the fire people to put it out? The fire department?
We can probably pull as much water as, I mean,
We're just gonna invite the
yes, the new truck, I mean, it can probably pull more water than we can actually pump in town.
Okay.
Our big ladder truck will pull more water, but we also have agreements with other fire departments to bring tankers down. As soon as
Okay.
like a fire started at John Deere, I'm gonna have 9 tankers with 3,000 gallons each coming, and we'll start drafting out of there and the hydrant for different trucks. But our platform, that hydrant, we wouldn't be able to run full force, but that's because of the big pump on the truck. It's made for more, it's actually almost too big for the city, but we put a bigger pump in it so we can draft out of tanks instead of pulling completely out of the,
1,000 gallons a minute,
our big truck's 2,000 gallons a minute.
all we can move into town at any one particular time is about 1,100 gallons a minute. That's all the water we can bring in.
When they come, they'll be bringing water, right?
Yes, it's automatically built into our mutual aid agreements that will get Willow, Palmyra, the new consolidated, they'll send at least 3 tankers besides Willow and Palmyra,
Can
so.
you get water at Clifford's Tower?
Huh?
Can you get water up at Clifford's Tower?
Yes, and that's the other thing, my captain on my fire department's on Rural 4, and he has an app on his phone. If we need more water, he can also turn the pumps up via his phone, and get the pumping, the water moving faster back up to the towers, to Clifford's Tower.
Do you have portable tanks?
Well, we don't, the tankers have them on there, we don't have no use for one, so we don't have a tanker, so we just use theirs. We'll set up 2 of them so we can dump 6,000 gallons on the ground at a time.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions for Brian?
Yeah.
One more. I asked you a question,
Yeah.
So,
He's feeling left out.
I mean, since you, threw the gauntlet down about 2030, what is your timeline? I think we can meet that, so what do you, I mean, what's your decision timeline?
I want to have my building up by the end of the year.
Okay.
We've got a lot going on in the works, so now's the time. Hasco feels that they can meet the timeline
If you get a decision on this soon.
soon.
Yeah.
Walk away. Okay, thank you very much.
No, I got
You do have a
I
question.
do, please.
Was there?
Are you, you made a comment about the sprinkler system ruining your equipment?
Yeah,
You more worried about that than you are a fire ruining it?
absolutely.
Than the fire ruining your equipment? Or if you don't have the sprinkler system and the fire truck's
I
running
have some
away, you know what's
colleagues,
gonna happen?
I have some colleagues in Houston that are just like me, job shops, machine shops, and they got their sprinkler systems turned off.
Well,
In the city of Houston.
Texas doesn't always do everything right.
I don't know, I got 2 shops down there and 1 here.
And neither one of those have done it, have they?
No.
You can read article after article. Bronx, New York, they have a requirement over 6 stories that you finally have to put sprinklers in. I mean, we're not crazy for asking this question.
This is not a.
I definitely invite you out to look at our setup, where the fire would come from, is, for me, it's hard to imagine. Electric fire inside of a machine, never heard of it, but I guess that's a potential.
Lightning strike.
Okay.
It's a metal building.
Well, it's true. I mean, I don't know what's gonna burn, maybe insulation on the wires, but I got him coming to put it out. 'Cause he's gonna know about
And
it,
he's gonna bring water.
And
It's
that's
gonna run
fine.
your machine.
and that's fine. It's fine.
Now then, there's one more
I just,
thing.
the malfunction is a concern.
There's one more thing I wanna say, and that's to both of you.
Okay.
I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you've got businesses here. And I don't know about the rest of the council, but I appreciate the fact that you're here doing your business. And I want you to be here doing your business, and I want you to do it safely. And I believe in the rules and regulations that's set forth, and that's, as Casey should have said to you when it's done, because it's part of his oath when he takes office to advise you of those things. And, but I appreciate the fact that you're here.
And
I appreciated the fact when you was out there in the country and I set your water meter too.
Well, I appreciate you guys, working with me to see that I do build my shop here. It's gonna be a beautiful building with a lot of.
Whether this goes for your, in your direction or not, is immaterial. I'm still glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thanks,
We're good?
Thank you.
Brian. Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? If not, we'll move to council discussion. So first off,
Now what?
I don't have an oath, I'm not an attorney that advises people on their rights. I actually appreciate people when they push back against the law a little bit. It's the only way you get change in society. If we didn't allow that, we'd never have any change. You might as well keep driving covered wagons down the
Well, if we
roadways.
got two of them, we could do that.
Yeah, we absolutely could.
So I think the question that falls on the council here is, that, I mean, it sounds like there's an individual path for every business to go, appeal to the state and have, you know, a variance one way or the other. I think the question that's presented to the council is, how much do we want growth to be restricted by code? That's the big question, as I'm seeing it.
I don't understand why this is before the council when we don't have any, it hasn't gone before zoning board, has it?
No.
We don't have any abstracts or any footprint of where all this is at? Yet are we way ahead of what we need
So
to
then
do?
we're gonna add more steps to a citizen versus them just coming and having a discussion before they spend tens of thousands of dollars,
Is what we're doing ethical?
changing ordinance?
Is this an ethical move?
Why would it be unethical?
Well, because we haven't followed what we usually follow.
So should we carve it all in stone and never change a thing for the
I
next
mean,
200 years?
There's really no point for a governing body if you're not ever willing to change any ordinances. We might as well just hand over the code book and say, here, city staff, run the city,
So what,
peace out.
what process steps you, sound like there's some
Usually-
process steps for this.
Usually when we go through a thing like this, we have blueprints that come up, we get to see the blueprints, see what's going on. There's an abstract already made, there's a footprint set out to where it's gonna be and all that stuff.
For zoning buildings, but I think this is I think that discussion's already been had with the,
But aren't we working towards the building?
now, this is to get to a building, them even wanting to put a building here.
So we are working towards the building.
That's the end goal. But they're not gonna potentially
They'll still
build a
have-
building if this ordinance stops them from doing it.
Dakota?
If,
So I think this goes back to what the council had asked me, which is that, and I think Jerry, what you're getting to is the normal process we go through here, board of zoning appeals, going, make an application to the, for building permit, that being denied, going to the board of zoning appeals, that process, and then finally coming to the council if that issue needs to come before the council. I think the difference, there's a distinction here, which is like, is that this is not a question about a zoning decision or a permit decision. So I don't know if I don't know if one's been applied for yet, I don't know the process, of where we are in that process. But if the council's talking about changing the code, with the blue and orange process, that's not specific to a single building. I think that's the important thing for the council to realize, that any change you were to make to the code through ordinance affects not a single building or a single citizen or individual, but anyone and everyone who wants to build inside of the city limits, which is where, as an attorney, I go back to my caution about, you know, it's one person can do it, and everyone can do it, then you're opening the gate to anyone who wants to walk in with the same situation, so it applies to everyone equally, opposed to the variance process that you're talking about, or a zoning repeal process you're talking about, which would be specific to the one building or one applicant. So I want, the kind of two paths are individual versus general, and what we're discussing today is a code change, a general change.
So I have a question. Didn't it say that the individual could, take their concerns to the fire marshal?
Yes.
There is a.
So why do we need to do that now? Why don't they take their concerns to the fire marshal and see if they're gonna be okay or not?
I'll speak first to Mr. Wagner, who I think he was, the part that he was quoting was highlighting the discretion that the city code enforcer has. If I have you right, yeah. And so I think that was the first point, to say that before we go point to black and white, there is discretion here. And I think you wanted to point that out first and foremost.
Okay.
And we have multiple businesses. I mean, as a municipality and a small municipality, with two of your largest businesses coming to you and saying, hey, we want to do these major projects.
I know,
I think
but I don't see why we should have to go through all the legal process of way that we would change the code and then take it to the fire marshal. If they can just go to the fire marshal, and once the fire marshal says, no, you can't do it, then it's already a solved problem.
Well, it doesn't though.
We're doing it, you say we're doing it backwards? They could go there first.
No,
and
I'm
then
just trying to
I agree with what
understand.
you're saying, because it does say that, I have read it.
And
Where they-
I don't mind the opportunity
I
to
don't
review what
either.
we're doing
This
here at all.
this is our local
Okay,
city,
well,
we should have a say in it.
We're just discussing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm trying to understand the process.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think the counterpoint that you're trying to make is, you know, we have a couple of our largest businesses that are pointing to an issue. They might get their own separate, you know, modifications approved, but then we're gonna continue to have these coming to us. If it really is something that's inhibiting us as a small town to attract businesses, this won't be the last one we're gonna get. So we have the opportunity now to say, we don't agree with that, or we wanna change it. That will then not be an issue for anybody going forward. That'll be one of the reasons I would think we'd want to at least take a look at it as a council, saying, let's fix this, at least what we see once, and no one's gonna have to come forward again, or seek their own modification.
If you know, we adopted the international code, just straight up. We didn't have any amendments to it or anything. We're a town of, probably at the time, 4,200 people. We adopted this, so to say that every single part of that code is gonna apply to us is, I think, absurd. There's gonna be places in there that just don't simply apply to us. I think this might be one of them. I think that this could be, the cost of installing these systems and the exposure that they create is huge for a business. I'm upset that they're in my business. I mean, I don't see, I see more harm than good coming from them, and I'm not the only one out there.
I'm taking what Dakota said to heart too, is that you do it for one, then you're gonna be doing it for everybody.
Well, that's what
Well,
we're doing here.
Not if,
Okay, but that.
not if you write it, not if you rewrite it with specific terms. You know, if you want, so right now, I think it says 17,000 square feet. I mean, you know how many buildings that are 17,000 square feet, that could be a lot, you know, that could apply to a lot bigger facility. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you could change to adapt it to your town specifically, that I feel like we ought to at least take a look at it and.
Glenn, have you
How
got
are we
guidance
gonna
here?
decide that? Are you gonna write it?
Well, we're a council of five.
That was my question, is, I mean, really how,
I mean, do you have any?
what's the carve out here that we're looking for? At least would take care of what we believe maybe are these issues that other businesses might have coming in. I just don't have a sense for it, because they're two separate issues.
They are. I mean, look at what we're trying to do though. We got an NRP. We're got it writ. We're trying to grow, and we're trying to make it easier on businesses to come here. And this is the exact kind of opportunity same decision-making process we went through with RID and NRP, and this is the exact one here. This huge cost. With RID and NRP, it's a lot of the infrastructure costs, and with what's been asked of us to revisit this, I think it's come from the same tree.
I think it's fine to revisit it, but I don't have the expertise to even begin to do it.
But that's where we vote to have the city attorney draft language for consideration in an ordinance for the city council.
I still go along with the idea, because it says that they can go to the state farm marshal themselves, and then, of course, the state farm marshal then send it to us, or send us information that has been passed and it was accepted, instead of going through all of us.
But that's the point of local government, is to give the local citizens an
We're not
option.
changing local government.
Oh, it is. If we adopted it in our city ordinance, you are changing the local government.
We adopted it in our city ordinance to follow it.
Yeah, and we could unadopt it to not follow it. The state law specifically says when a municipality adopts. So if we don't adopt, I guess,
Well, point of clarification, you must have a fire prevention code in the state.
oh, we can develop our own.
Correct,
But it
but it has to
says
be, but it has to be approved by the state fire marshal. So if that's that's the intent of the discussion, and you're getting a little hard to follow here, because I'm not sure what path you're going down, actually, is it an individual, are you talking about changing the entire ordinance, submitting that to the state fire marshal for their approval, because they'll have to, I get 30 days, they'll review and approve whatever we send, but I'm not sure what that difference is going to be.
Well,
I'm
it
not sure
depends
what
on,
we're submitting at this point.
yeah, it depends on how we amend that portion of the code to
Right.
submit to them.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure who's gonna be doing what at that point.
So I'm okay with looking at a proposed amendment. I don't know what that, we would propose that to be.
I think we, Dakota, correct me, I mean, that's when we'd ask you to go work with the fire, or the state fire marshals, and see if you can develop a amendment.
I'll cut it real quick. I mean, you did mention that every time one of these amendments is made, the fire marshal you can go in, you can access the reasoning, the whole,
So that would be for individual
okay,
petitions.
they don't do it for municipalities.
You would get your
The
own.
rationale.
You would get a response from within 30 days, but it's not, the difference is it's not a system that they store. And if you look at the KARs on that, it's specifically in the KARs that for individual requests, they must store those for access. The way there's exemptions, I think the explicit language is, let's see. Well, and this might not, it might be in the actual, in the statute, not in the KAR, but they are accessible to all, they're stored in the office, at the state fire marshal office, you can set those are the various exemptions by individual petitioners. But we would receive, wherever we send it to them, we'd receive a response back, that would be written as well, but there's not a,
You can't go see other
I
examples of
can't
other
go
towns.
search through those.
Well, we have a listserv bill.
And so, what we have is, we have, the Kansas municipalities and all the other municipalities that are on listserv who I can talk with and discuss what they've done in the past, if anyone else has made amendments or modifications to their code and what was approved and what wasn't approved. So there's resources there, and Kaylin can also, I think, has a good starting jumping off point for what they would recommend in terms of language. All that's being said, I think what I would need from the council to even start with was, I could present you a whole host of options, but I didn't know what it is that the purpose and goal that the council wants to explore, not necessarily wants to adopt, but so I can give you different options based upon what the goal is here. Because to say the code is voluminous is an understatement. I mean, it is a 700-page document, and so are we talking only about fire suppression systems? Are we talking about, is it just stripping things out? Are we wanting to make modifications that add in additional language? And so that's where I think potentially getting some information from other municipalities and from the state fire marshal's office, and having me report back to the council might be a good starting point, so you would know then what you want to do in terms of adopting language, if that's even what you want to do.
Could you simply add a clause and present it to the state fire marshal that says any fire suppression safety can be contingent on council decision?
Well, that's not a modification of the code. So what you're submitting to the, I mean, I guess you could conceivably write up.
I'm thinking about it from an exposure standpoint, because the fire marshal's he or she's gonna be the first to say no to any recommended changes.
Mhm.
Whereas we're closer to it.
There's gotta be a way, because other municipalities in the state of Kansas don't have the requirement of this size of a building to have fire suppression system. You go out to the rural areas,
State statute,
who's enforcing it?
Huh?
Who's enforcing it?
the state marshal's office.
It's state statute that you have to have fire code. It doesn't say what that code has to be.
There's state statute that you can't smoke marijuana or sell marijuana, THC in the state of Kansas.
Well, I guess you can do that if you don't take a chance.
Other municipalities don't enforce it.
I think you're getting off it.
No.
So let's figure out, do we want then I mean, there's kind of different burdens of argument. So if the petitioners go on their own, they have to show, and I'm just reading here from what you sent, they want to take advantage of new method or equipment not contemplated by the adopted code, or undue unnecessary hardship, so that's a different burden of proof than we would have to do as a council to just change the fire code that the fire marshal would support. We don't have to have any of that rationale. It's part of what we would do, but we can just say, this is what we believe best fits our community of this size, and we believe it, it's safe, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a different analysis that the state fire marshal would go through. Is there a hardship? And I'm not dissuading you guys from pursuing it on your own as well. It's always a path. I'd be willing to look at it.
Have you tried that? Have you tried the fire marshal's office before you came here?
No,
Had it entered your mind to do that?
no. What's entered my mind is to ask you guys to instruct your building code officer to make a modification on this project and that project.
He doesn't have the authority to do that.
Yes, he does. 104.10, I read it to you, Jerry.
That's part of my other concern is I'd rather limit the discretion that inspector has, because I don't know how you keep track of who got the exceptions and who didn't. So if I come in and we give it to one, and then we have a new building inspector, or even the same one, and someone else comes in and they don't give them, where's the transparency? How do we make sure that everybody's being treated the same way? In my mind, you fix the code where they don't have that decision, at least in the cases that you can. And so that's why I would prefer to see this as a code change, as opposed to just getting discretion on these two projects. We're going to have to continue to do that every time going forward.
Everything's being done fair and honestly the same way because it's a state statute and it says what they have to do.
Whenever you say discretion, that's very subjective.
Okay, it is by state statute that it says.
I know.
Certain
Well,
things. And he follows the law. I presume that the law is being followed. In every case, everybody's treated the same.
Well, when
Just
you
like the guy
have, when
that's
you
got
have
free-
discretion, you don't have to, there is no, it's your discretion.
If the intention was for it to be black and white law, they wouldn't have spent the paragraph typing up that you can have discretion.
Right. Because you can't take all cases into consideration. It's just impossible. So when it comes up to it, you don't want to have to go through this process every time. But now that we have this process, we have an opportunity, if we want, to change this to where that discretion is removed on this specific issue, and the building inspector doesn't have to even worry about it going forward. This is the new code.
Sorry to interrupt, Scott. I just want to make sure, we were talking about state law and then code. What we're discussing is 104.10, the modification section of the IBC code
Right.
that allows the building official to have authority to grant modifications. So it's not state law, but it's.
We're talking about both.
Yeah, okay, but, and is it, and this goes back to what I want to make sure I know to research. Are we also then considering removing that ability to modify, make modifications by the building official?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
I don't think so.
I
I think,
I just want to make sure, because you're talking about, you know.
No, but every time something comes up like this, we may want to remove that discretion if it makes sense. If,
And so are you talking, so then it goes to, is the proposal then the council would, in a case-by-case basis, remove the discretion from the building code officer?
we would have the same conversation we're having right now. So I think the conversation is our code that we adopted, does it fit the community and what, you know, what we want to do as a community? And we haven't been through it all. We haven't run into all the cases. You don't know till you run right into it. Then you go, you know what? We might want to look at that again because it doesn't fit what we're trying to do. So
So we change the code every time somebody comes up.
we have the opportunity to do that, yes. Doesn't mean we would.
Are there any cases in town, where this is being, where there, somebody is already putting in a sprinkler system? Is there any
I don't know.
that we know of?
Is somebody's already putting in?
Yeah, that somebody's already started putting in one because they didn't have one.
So
Well,
I did. I did.
what?
We had a dead sprinkler system and then we were,
But it was already there.
it wasn't pressurized. We had to pay to have it upgraded.
So you got it upgraded, or you gonna upgrade it?
It's done. That's the question you're asking, right? Has anybody been affected by it yet?
Yeah, or did they do it, or is anybody doing it? So if we changed it, and there's somebody in town that's doing it, do we get them their money back, or?
No, it's done.
It's done.
It's a done deal.
It was their choice.
It was at that point in time.
So let's make a decision here, what we want to do.
I'm all for moving forward with changing this, obviously.
Looking at a change proposed.
I don't even need to look at it.
Well,
I kind of like to look at it.
I
I
think,
can look at it.
I think we need to have Dakota bring back
Right.
what we should do, I mean, for us to look at.
I'd really like to see, let's just be transparent about it. I mean, we're talking about code affecting growth here. I think that's kind of, Baldwin may not apply to the international code. So I think I'd like to see other communities that were faced with that challenge and their code's public record and go look at it and see what they did.
He evidently knows one, because he said they don't have it in other places in Kansas, so.
I can tell you in DeMar, Kansas, where I grew up, they sure don't have a code.
How big is Lamar?
DeMar, it's about 150 people. But according to your theory, they're required to follow state law, and I can tell you, you don't follow state law.
No, so for Dakota's guidance, I think that's it.
So, I think, from our perspective, what would be probably the most helpful thing is in direction from the council about what you want me to look into. I can do that, bring back to council at the next meeting. I think that can include anything up to removal of code, and if that is allowed by state law, modifications to the code. And what I'm hearing right now, I just want to, like I said, the code is complicated, has a lot of different classifications. My understanding is that both the owners who came in before the council tonight all need an F1 designation for the type of building type under the code.
That means five sprinklers.
And so with that F1 designation, are we wanting me to tailor this narrowly, maybe to give you some insight into narrow, broader, and the broadest kind of interpretations for the purpose of encouraging growth while maintaining safety? And I think, I'm trying to get it.
That's- Yeah.
Okay, that I can do, and I'll do that by researching and talking with other municipalities in KLM. But what I would suggest is at the next council meeting, well before then, have a packet to everybody that goes over what kind of process would be, and as well as suggested changes with some model language or proposed language, depending on what route you want to take. And at that point, then council can also obviously direct me to do additional research, do additional fact finding, whatever. So you have at least have a starting off point for some potential resolutions, and that'd be on the 21st.
Yeah, I think,
Do we need a motion on that?
well, we will, but I think I would like to see a proposal of that research as well. Because, I mean, we can push it off as long, but as long as we continue to work, so that way we're not taking up time, that next meeting we say, okay, yep, this looks good. And then we wait 2 more weeks for a write-up, and then 2 more weeks.
I mean, I can appreciate that. I think as the city attorney, I want to make sure that I'm not usurping your role as the council in terms of actually developing the ordinance language instead, or the what it is that you want on that post. So I can give you a host of suggestions and proposals, but I think it would be, I feel a little uneasy making a single proposal as to this is what you should, how you should change this code, and this is the language I would propose. I think I could give you many options, and then you could craft it from there.
And that's what I meant,
Okay.
proposed options that we could use
That works for me.
that would fit the scenario that we all know.
Okay.
But yes, I would prefer to vote on that.
So you will find out whether we can or whether we can.
So, I'll certainly, I think there's a question regarding just the code generally, and I'll make sure that we know whether or not, as a city of our class, whether or not we need to have a fire code in place to begin with, and then what modifications what I try to, hopefully will do is find successful modifications that address this issue. So modifications other municipalities have made, have been approved by the state fire marshal, that would potentially address the issue that has been brought before the council tonight.
And once you receive this information that's done, and we make that proposal, then does it still have to go back to the state fire marshal? Because
So that if you were to,
we're gonna take 2 weeks, and then there's another 30 days after that.
so if the city council passes an ordinance which would modify the portion of the code that we've been discussing tonight, at that point, it then gets sent to the state fire marshal, so there would be, once they receive it, so for the date of receival, there's a 30-day, at least, not, at most 30 days.
Yes.
They can respond in 2 days, they can respond in 30 days. Having worked with the state for a long time and making requests, I'm guessing it'll be closer to 30 than 2, but the 30 days is the maximum time they have to respond.
So Dakota, I have one question on KOR 22-11.
Yes.
B says each alternate method of fire protection that has been approved by a local board of appeals as a substitute for strict compliance with code requirements shall be deemed to be in compliance with the Kansas Fire Prevention Code.
Yes.
So our local appeal body can change it, and that is deemed appropriate by,
So they're not changing any code. What the local board of appeals would be doing would be finding an alternative method of fire protection that's been approved. So if something's gone before them with a alternative method and it's been approved by the local board of appeals, my reading of this says that then becomes the Kansas Fire Prevention Code or the state fire marshal deems actually been in compliance with the Kansas Fire Prevention Code. So, it's not a modification of the code, it's not an ordinance being passed, but the state fire marshal is reviewing the local board of appeals, finding that the alternative method is a suitable alternative to the strict compliance with code. But again, that's a separate, that's not the council doing that, that would be the
correct,
board of appeals and following the process that Jerry was talking about previously.
okay. I just wanted to check.
Mhm.
Alright. So with that, we have a motion?
You need a motion, or can you just direct it?
I prefer a motion.
I move that we approve to give our city attorney authority to move forward with researching how to maybe change the fire code. No, I'm gonna, so.
Close enough? Dakota, or do you want that
You need
stated?
that, you need that better?
So again,
Pull it up for you.
what I would prefer is as I said, I think I understand, but based upon this conversation tonight, a motion that directs me to research and provide proposed language, a modification of the code, that would encourage growth or, and address concerns brought before the council while maintaining public safety. That I think is what's in the code, the charge of the code is, and from what I've heard tonight, that's what the concerns I've heard from the council are, is how do we balance growth and with the code that purpose is to ensure that we maintain like life and the health of the public. So that to me would make the most sense, and then I can bring back proposed language for any changes that the council made.
Are you good with that motion, language?
Yep, I'm very good with that motion then.
So you can just go back on the recording?
Yeah.
Get that one.
I second.
Moved in second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay, motion passes.
That 104, that 104.
Next item on the agenda is the Sprint grant application.
It says F1, is that will be something we discussed? Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Donna Curran. I am the Vice President of the Lumberyard Arts Center. Our president is sick tonight, so she was not able to make it. With me, I have most of the board. Stand up. Be recognized. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. It is with much excitement that the Kansas Department of Commerce has advertised a grant funding. This is a one-time opportunity through the Sprint program to help stimulate tourism with funding up to $10 million for individual projects. A total of $30 million is available. The Lumberyard Arts sees this as a significant opportunity to develop the unfinished portion of the building that will create a creative arts complex in conjunction with Sullivan Square to attract people to create, play, shop, and eat in downtown. Due to the public-private nature of this project and the Arts Center's limited capacity, we discussed the possibility with the city Baldwin administrator for the Baldwin City to apply for this grant for us. And we are here to answer any questions that the council has for their support.
Any questions for Donna?
Is it matching grant or what?
It is not. It is a full grant
Hard to argue.
that will cover the building of it.
Rebut
Yes.
that. How do you bug that?
It's hard to argue that. That's a good answer.
This is something that, if you know me, and if you've ever been to the Lumberyard Arts Center, you come in, you've never been there before, I'm gonna show you that back end. I'm gonna show you what we want to do with that. We have overdreamed it, we've wondered what we can do to make it even better. We have a wonderful engineer who has drawn up all of the plans. And then, of course, we have our wonderful director, Jeanette Blackmer, that has written the grant for us.
Is the intention still to make it a theater? I think that was kind of the
It
original idea, yeah.
is a black box theater
Oh,
with, you want me to go ahead and do it?
Yeah.
With a second floor, which will be the catwalk,
cool.
with a third floor on top of that, which will be artists in residence, a ceramic, and if it comes off great, over a patio, a rooftop patio that will overlook Sullivan Square.
Cool.
So yeah,
Very cool.
That'd be
so
really,
Is that what the liquor license was for?
Yeah. No, this was one thing that came up, that just was like, boom, it was thrown at us, and we're like, oh my gosh, we've been waiting this for 13 years to have this completed. So,
And when's the grant application due and when?
March
will
14th,
When will you find out? Do you know?
Early April.
early.
Well, that's.
Yes, and then it has to be completed within a 2-year period, right? I'm looking for Jake. In 2-year period. So it's not like a project that we're gonna get the money and then it's gonna prolong. It is, we get the money and we are on the run. We're hitting the pavement and going for it. So, yeah.
Any other questions for Donna?
No, you guys are easy on me. Or not on me, on them. But yes, it's one of those things that, you know, we're not gonna have to pay it back, we're not gonna have to
Great.
do any fundraisers, it's gonna be done,
Great
so.
opportunity.
It's a wonderful
We
opportunity.
waited so long, so.
Yeah, we have waited so long.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Don.
Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Any council discussion?
I think that'd be great.
I will entertain a motion.
I move to apply for this grant as presented.
Second.
Been moved to second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Next item is council committee reports, budget and finance stuff.
All right, I'll try to keep it short. So we had 2 agenda items. One of them was to try to get a consistent understanding of the electric fund reserve. And I think we achieved that. And so I just kind of want to update the council on what all that looks like. So at the end of December 22, we were at $1.7 million in the reserve for the electric utility. Our policy is 15 to 25%, so we're targeting to have 25% of revenue in reserve, and that would equate to $750,000 to roughly $1.3 million. So currently, we're sitting over the funding, but however, we've got some unbudgeted items that we need to pay for in '23, including the installation of generators, estimated about $800,000. Potential unforecasted energy purchase costs. We saw about $300,000 increase last year, so we need to plan on maybe seeing the same thing this year. So the bottom line is if you take that, 1.3 million, that, some of that will occur, some of it may not, but it gets us down to about 600,000, which is below our policy. So what I would recommend or ask the council is, what I would like to do is get the Budget and Finance Committee to come forward with a recommendation on how to manage that reserve fund and make sure that we stay within policy and certainly end up with a target 25%. But that's gonna take some leasing of some things, the timing of all that. So with the council's permission, I'd like to ask if the committee can come back with some recommendations on how we manage that fund, which will inevitably require us leasing maybe the generators that we already bought back to ourselves, spreading those payments out, and potentially the utility truck that we bought that's in the current budget. So it's not a,
But you still gotta take this, 360,000.
what's that?
You still gotta work in the 360,000
From,
for the school.
They didn't
they
take the offer.
didn't take the offer.
But the offer's still there, they haven't been denied.
That's true. However, we would have the ability, if they come back and, if we're not in a position to do it, we would turn it down. So they basically said thanks, but no thanks. If they came back and said, hey, we actually need it, then I think we'd come back here and see if we can still do it.
Do you have a thing in mind before you start working this out? Have you got a direction you're gonna go with it?
Yeah, but it's not, doesn't matter what I think. I think the committee needs to talk it through. There's multiple ways we can do it. There's a timing of when we do it. So those are kind of 2 things that we would suggest, going forward. But I think you come back and say, here's what we propose, what do you think, and yay or nay, and move forward. I think we can come to that decision on Friday. So we would have it at the next council meeting. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we approved leasing authority on the generator purchase, correct?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, the previous council.
Yeah, at 1.5, whatever that was, the total?
Up to, we were.
Up to
It
1.5.
was not to exceed.
So,
Correct.
and that apparently doesn't expire.
And we still have to bring that back in front of the council.
We do,
when get the
yes.
bids.
We do, but my point is that in itself is almost like a reserve that we have. We don't have to, if the deadline is to make that decision on do that lease, by the end of this month, we have to make that decision. We don't necessarily have to make that decision this month. We can make that decision in 2 months or 3 months, if that's, if that makes more sense. Once we see what our actual expenses are, those types of things. I think we're gonna have to do something. I think the question is how much? How much do we need to do to make sure we end up at, 1.3 million at the end of the year in the reserve?
And one thing we wanted to look at, Jerry, was to how much, with the interest rates fluctuating so much right now, how much is our lease interest rate gonna be versus how much are we collecting on the money that we have in the bank right now?
Right.
Because sometimes that money we're collecting in the bank is at a higher interest rate, which therefore covers more than the interest that we might get from that lease. So it's just a balancing act to
Yeah.
observe both of those.
Where are we standing in our loan rate?
Oh,
It was
the bond rating?
It was, yeah, bond rating. It was
Yeah.
3 the last time they, what is it now?
It hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. I think you'd look at it every 2 years,
Well, it looks at it every time we go for a new bond.
or 2 years or whatever.
Every what? I'm sorry.
It'll, I mean, they could potentially if S&P or whatever, but we're so small a city, probably won't just do an independent
Okay, so,
audit of it, so we probably would fall into that category. So every time we go out for a new bond issue, which we do have some that would be coming up, then they rate you every time we go out for a bond.
so they look back 2 years though, is that the?
They look back
Is that the
2
look
years,
back?
that's
So they'll look back 2
it.
years. So
Yeah.
if we had, if we've gotten to where our policy is, for 2 years, then potentially our bond rating would go back up.
So what you're saying is we don't wait too long.
Well, you can't, I don't think they look at what you do immediately, they look at what you did last year and the year before. You can't artificially move things around and say, look at our reserve fund. It doesn't work that way. It's gotta be year over year, previous years, not current year.
So it goes back.
It looks back, so. And we've had a plan to get that reserve fund, and it's, by the way, it's above our policy at the end of this year. Right, so that's one of the years they're gonna look at. We wanna make sure we stay there at the end of this year, and that's what we wanna come back with. Because if we just pay things, without doing any of the leases, we're gonna be below that, potentially.
I'm concerned that we don't get down below, taking the next employment paychecks.
I don't think we have a problem. It's covering all of our paychecks.
So, if you guys are good with that, we'll come back with some recommendations on how we wanna manage that fund, the reserve fund, okay? The only other thing we discussed was, potential, assistant administrator, impacted budget, what do we have? That's a general fund item, most of it. So is there enough budget to do something this year, and obviously they would have to fit that in the next year as well. So I think the feedback we got from Ben was based on sales tax and some of the performance of the revenues coming into the general fund, it looked doable.
Alright,
That's it.
next meeting 7:45 Friday.
Next thing, 7:45 Friday morning.
Alright, community development, Corey.
Yeah, we met on 27th here, pretty light meeting. Let's see, discussed the community center update. They requested that they'd send an extension out for the bids. Let's see, discuss the sprinkler ordinance. I think we covered that one pretty good. Discuss the lumberyard grant, that Sprint grant, just kind of chatted about that a little bit, it wasn't really an agenda item. And then the raise grant that we applied for the trail, I think was due on the 28th, right, Glenn?
That's correct.
Okay, when we find out about that?
I don't know what the time is.
Yeah, it was
on
kind
that.
of
That's-
vague.
They've always been vague on when they would actually announce those things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but what's happening with that though is the rounds are coming quicker than there's 5 rounds of that.
Right.
So we're anticipating 5 years, but I think they've kind of moved up their timeline, because
Right.
this wasn't a year ago for the original grant. So, you know, that's always been a little bit of a murky process there.
And that raise grant's the $20 million one.
Yeah, that's for the trail.
The raise grant, the other one is, I can never remember the acronyms. What's the other one that we're still out for?
Spark,
Spark.
they have not made a decision on that. That actually is a Spark committee is one that actually is reviewing the Sprint grant. It's out of that same pool of money.
So instead of giving out,
So, yeah.
money, they just change the name.
They just changed, right.
It's easier that way.
Yes, I know, it's getting a little hard to track, but,
Fair enough. So, okay, that's all we had. Our next meeting is the 20th, 4 o'clock, 2nd floor City Hall.
I'm worried about this one. Public safety, Jerry. Didn't meet. Public works, Julie.
We haven't met since the last meeting, and our, meeting is going to be this Thursday, the 9th at 9 o'clock.
She's paying.
We didn't meet since the last meeting. Our next meeting is this Friday at 3 p.m., 2nd floor City Hall.
You can camp downtown.
Scott, 3.
3, yeah.
City administrator staff comments?
just one update. We did get, bids for the new community center. We got one, and it's way over what we had expected or what we budgeted for, so it's gonna go back to community development. I believe the total bid was almost $3.4 million, which is about double what the architect's estimate on that project was. So we'll go back to the committee and discuss our options going forward. They're gonna either pare down the project or rebid or whatever we need to do, but that's way over what we had anticipated.
Do you know what drove that up so high?
I know you looked at some of the, you know, it's really,
It's not even in the ballpark, man.
no, it's not even close. Yeah, it's just the material and labor has just gone through the roof, and we're finding this on every project right now, unfortunately. Everything's escalated on everything, so didn't expect to come in that high, though, we really did. That's way high. We only received one bid, so.
We had that same issue,
Sullivan Square, yeah, because the
police station was the same thing.
the stage was double what we had anticipated, so we got half the size of the stage, so it's not unusual, but now it's even more than it has been, so everything's just escalated, so now we're gonna make some tough decisions on that, so we'll bring that back.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I do. Mr. Wagner, I'm not picking on you, so let this go. When you do this deal with the fire thing that you're gonna do we have to take into consideration that he has a building prior to what this discussion came about that doesn't have a sprinkler system in it?
I guess that to me is, are you asking, will an addition to the building, you want the answer that whether or not addition to the building will trigger retroactive application for the rest of the building?
Yes.
I can answer that, I can look into that for you, it's not an issue, but I don't think that's something that.
Because
I
what he
can
has asked for is the new building that he wants to build. We still got the old building to go with, which if he builds a new one, does he have to go back and do the old one too?
So you're, I mean, again, that's a specific question regarding this, well, I think the question, I want to be clear, is if you make an addition to any building that has grandfathered in, does that remove that grandfather protection by making any addition to that building?
That's correct. There you go.
I can ensure that,
You
I
got
can
it,
ensure
yeah.
that.
I like the way we handled this, to get him to go do that. I really do, I feel good about it. I'm through, Casey, you can shut her down.
I have a couple of things. I was, last meeting, we were gonna have Glenn negotiate with KMEA on the stuff that Mike brought to us. Is that correct?
What's
on the substation?
But no, we approved it.
Oh, we approved moving forward with that proposal.
Okay, so
Yeah,
there
there's-
wasn't any other negotiation?
No, that
That
was,
was-
yeah,
that was
that's
the
a,
full proposal.
right, that's a deal with them to go ahead and do
Okay,
that, yeah.
great. The other thing is, I was wondering if we couldn't get our information in our packet earlier. Cause I looked on the computer this afternoon to get ready for the meeting, and then I looked right before I came, and there was a whole bunch of stuff on there that wasn't on there before.
So we addressed that because we didn't get a lot of the information until today. If you noticed, we actually put out the agenda, not this last Friday, but the Friday before, so that you guys could be aware of some things. Obviously, it may change during that, because it did, but I did have Amber go ahead and at least get that agenda item up. Sometimes we don't get the information for this stuff until that, but I have asked as soon as you get it, or as soon as they get it, that it's dropped in there. I know they were having computer problems. is what I
Yeah,
was
and I will get it in sooner. I will try my best, yeah.
It's just that I don't know what we're talking about when I don't have time to review the
I looked
information.
at sprinkler systems and I thought, now what fellow's gonna come in and wanna put a sprinkler system in his yard that we're gonna get involved in?
No, you didn't.
I
No, you
appreciate it.
You knew exactly what it was.
But if it,
Huh?
if it isn't in time.
You knew exactly what it was for.
How do you know that?
Compelled to make a
Because-
decision. You
ask me.
for more time.
I didn't ask you.
Yes, you did.
When did I ask you?
You asked me last week.
No, I didn't ask you. You did.
We get all these people now, we can use it.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, we're adjourned.
Point, yeah, Mr. Rasmussen.